Willkommen, bienvenue, and welcome. I'm Rob Doherty, and this is the FSTVS Podcast Executive Edition, supported by Libery Consulting and hosted by Julian Scott, the animation consultant for Film London. In this podcast series, we'll be chatting to the movers and the shakers in the animation industry, and discovering a little bit more about what they do, how they got there, their thoughts on the animation industry, and I hope get to meet the person behind that executive title. Today you're in for a treat as Julian sits down with Ryan Delaney, production executive at Warner Brothers Pictures Animation. When the lead-in line is, "People like me don't end up with the career that I have," you know you're going to get some fascinating and inspiring insights into a career journey, and Ryan does not disappoint, something his amazing film credits are testament to. So grab a cuppa and ease into whatever else you're doing to listen to Julian Scott speaking to Ryan Delaney. Marine biology's loss is animation's gain. Enjoy.
Ryan, welcome to the Executive Sessions podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Now, you've just started a very big key role with Warner Brothers Pictures Animation here in London, and we'll chat about that in a bit. But looking back, your career has spanned VFX and animation on major films like Total Recall, Men in Black, Tom and Jerry, Coyote v. Acme, and TV series like the Lego TV series for Cartoon Network. Yet, when you and I first met socially, you said that people like you don't end up with the career that you've had. What makes you say that?
Oh, it's because you can hear it in my voice. Like I'm an East London boy, and where we grew up, all our fathers were tradesmen, and we had that expectation on us to go into a physical trade where we would work hard and long hours and we'd support families. And it was a bit of a sort of like a toxic mindset of you had to suffer to sort of make it in this world. And if you was smart, then you could be an electrician, maybe not a carpenter or decorator, because they got better day rates. But it wasn't really like a role model that you could look to and be like, well, they did it, so we can do it as well. And I didn't really know that film and TV was a profession. It just sort of felt like something that other people somewhere else got to do. So I just kind of assumed that I would end up being a tradesman. My uncle was a scientist, and I kind of wanted to follow his. I was a smart kid, so I wanted to follow in his footsteps a little bit. My dad always said, "Don't be a carpenter. You'll ruin your knees, you'll ruin your hands." So it was from a really young age. I wanted to do something that wasn't be a tradesman, but that was. We had a career day at school, and me and all my mates kind of came out of it thinking if we wanted to avoid being a tradesman, we had a clear path, and that was to join the army. And we didn't want to do that either. We had to work out. We had to wait till later in life to work out what we'd be.
And when you were a kid, was there, any inclination that your path away from what you felt was maybe destined for you, that would lead you to VFX and animation? Were there films or TV series that inspired you to think about possibly? I mean, you said you didn't know that sort of film was a profession per se, but that was an area that you might head towards. Or did you have any other ideas?
Yeah, I was surrounded by film growing up. My nan and granddad had this amazing VHS collection where my nan had recorded films off the telly and alphabetized it, and you'd go into their back room, and they must have had hundreds of VHSs sort of with 3 very random movies all sort of butted onto each one. So we'd watch movies every night with my nan and granddad because my mum and dad were working really long hours. Jason and the Argonauts was my favourite, and it was sort of those kind of movies that my nan and granddad enjoyed, and I couldn't work out how they did it. My nan and granddad would say stop motion, and we'd my granddad had a camera. He used to take photos of space, of the moon, just as a hobby in his garden. So we'd take photos of our toys and flick them through to see them moving. And that was the closest I got to sort of producing anything. My mum and dad were into film. My aunt and uncle they showed us some very heavy films at a very young age, which I shouldn't have done. But film was fun. I remember seeing Jurassic Park and Toy Story at the cinema and kind of coming out and being like, wow, like they I didn't know how they had done it. And I was super inspired by it. But again, I was told that I was going to be a tradesman when I grew up. And I wanted to be, like I said, I wanted to be a scientist. I thought if I studied hard, I was good at biology and maths. I thought if I studied hard, I wanted to be a marine biologist. My uncle had moved to the US when he was a teenager and had gone on to be a scientist in America, which was like this incredible thing for someone growing up in East London to have achieved. And I thought being a marine biologist meant swimming with sharks. So I thought, I'll do that. That sounds like a really cool job. I was surrounded by film and wanted to learn more about it. But again, I didn't know that was an industry I could enter. So as a kid, I was sort of like working out how to get into the swimming with sharks, as it were.
So what changed your direction? I mean, you were thinking about maybe being a marine biologist, something. What changed your direction towards the world of film?
I fell in love. I was at college and I was doing chemistry, maths, biology and IT. And I wasn't, I was 17, 18. It wasn't a love of mine to be a marine biologist. It was an escape path more than something I wanted to do. And I met, she's now my wife, but back then sort of like I met her, I asked her out and was absolutely in love with her, and she was doing film production and media production. And so I dropped out of my courses to be closer to her and learn about lighting and cinema and sort of the history of film. And it was good because I went into that classroom and I was good at it because I'd kind of accidentally got this film education from my nan and granddad, from my mum and dad and aunt and uncle. I sort of went into this environment. I was like, oh, cool. I've got a lot of it. I've seen a lot of these films already. But yeah, it was my wife that sort of swung me in that direction, as it were.
And did you stick with that course? Presumably not just to be with your to-be wife, but did you stick with that course and see it through?
Yeah, I finished it. It was really cool. I made one or two terrible student movies, but I've still got. And I really enjoyed it. Like for the first time, I was studying something I enjoyed. And then I applied to a few universities. I got onto a script writing course at Richmond, and on day one, everyone was writing this like Shakespearean kind of poetry, and we had to write a short story and read it out to the group. And my favourite author at the time was Kurt Vonnegut. So I wrote A Bit of Madness is what I wrote. I was trying to do a social commentary with like a bit of a mad situation. And my lecturer, I read it out, and my lecturer was sort of like, yeah, that's not what this course is. And that was like day one. So I was sort of like, okay, well, this isn't where I was meant to be. And meanwhile, my wife was doing media production at a different university. So just before it went too long, I switched again to follow her and just thought, you know what, I was enjoying it when I was learning about film and media with her. She would go on later on in life, she would go on to work in radio. But I knew that film and TV was something I loved, and I was beginning to get an understanding that there was a career to be had in it. I just didn't know what that career looked like.
So you didn't have when you joined that new course, that degree course, you didn't think to yourself, right, this is where I see this course leading me to.
No, it's just I'd had that taste at college of studying film and media, and like I had learned to love something like an educational course. It was it opened my eyes a bit. So, I thought I could be a writer. I've gone on to write things for myself down the years, but I enjoy it. I'm good at numbers. I'm good at schedules and things and Excel and things like that. So it's sort of, it's an enjoyment of mine. But yeah, I followed my wife onto that course because I just thought, when I was doing it at college, I was enjoying it, and I wanted to stick with things that I was enjoying very much.
And to be fair, who doesn't love a good spreadsheet?
It's like it sounds awful, but the amount of people I speak to, and I'm like, I really dig Excel, and they say it back to me, and it's kind of like, are we the broken ones, or sort of like, what is this?
And getting your first break in the business can be tricky. We've all had to do it. How and where did your first break come? Was there lots of banging on doors, sending out CVs and stuff like that?
Yeah, it was University of Bedfordshire I went to with my wife. In Luton it was, and it wasn't the greatest university in the land is what I'll say about it. There wasn't much to do outside of our classes, so we spent a lot of time just sort of like hanging around places, not really doing anything. And this one day, I think I was at the start of my second year of university, someone was handing out flyers for unpaid floor runners on an independent movie called Mad, Sad and Bad. I think it was sort of like a $500,000 budget. Mira Sayal was the leading star of the movie, and they didn't have budget. They was being very ambitious with what they wanted to do. So I took the flyer and thought, cool, why not? I'm not doing anything else. And just immediately fell in love with being on a live action shoot. You step onto it, and the job was to make sure someone didn't walk up a set of stairs or to make sure that a door stayed shut. Like, it was the most minimal, like a traffic cone could do your job almost. But it was sort of like it was being in that environment, and all of a sudden I saw carpenters and electricians, but they were working in film, and they were doing very different things with their skill sets. And you also see hair and makeup and costume and ADs. There are people that were just running around telling people what to do. And it was sort of like, I knew straight away that there was a job there for me, and that there was 1,000 jobs, and it was about working out which one I wanted to do. All of a sudden, like, the industry exploded in a single unpaid role, as it were. So I worked hard at that. I was enjoying it. I went from one sort of like unpaid floor running position to another. I did music videos and TV shows, feature films, and it's hard because I wouldn't say that I was exploited. I did do unpaid floor running for 2 years, so I was giving up my time for free. But I wouldn't say I was exploited because I was loving it and it was serving a purpose for me. I was very slowly working out what it was that I wanted to do. But it did involve, when I wasn't at university and I wasn't floor running, I had to be working. I worked in a betting shop, just doing shift work in a betting shop to try and pay the bills. I didn't have sort of parental money coming in to support university courses. So it was a difficult time, but it was a lot of fun. And then I managed to get hold of the email address of Alon Reich at DNA Films. And I kind of like very politely emailed him once a week for a couple of months until he replied one day saying, he sent a reply, and it was his mistake to reply to me, because it was sort of like, it was just a reply saying, look, we'll get our ducks in a row, then we'll work out when you can come in. And as soon as he'd done that, I knew that he would, if I just kept going, he'd keep replying. So I just kept emailing him until he gave me a week's work experience. And I was sure of myself that if I could get myself in that building, they wouldn't want me to leave. And it just worked out that I did my week's worth of work experience. And then they offered me my first paid job in the industry. How
long was it for you got your first paid job?
2 years, a year and a half, 2 years of unpaid floor running, sort of like a couple of days here, a couple of days there. I did some floor running on Hotel Babylon, which was awesome. It felt like I'd landed a big role, like being an unpaid floor runner on Hotel Babylon. And we had to be on set at like 4 a.m. and we would wrap at like 10, 11 p.m. And I remember like getting home, sleeping for an hour, and then going back to work for no pay whatsoever. But it was, like I say, it's hard to say that that's not exploiting people. Maybe it was done in a level of exploitation, but I didn't feel that because I was working out what it was that I wanted to do with sort of like no responsibility attached. I wasn't committing to something, as it were.
No, I completely understand. And you started off in live action, as you said. You did some really cool films, and I think you worked on The In-Betweeners as well, didn't you?
Yeah, well, DNA Films was on Greek Street at the time. They were still in Soho. They've moved since then, and it was just a great place to be. I was too junior at the time to realize how good a first job it was, but I was getting access to some really high level people, taking really high level meetings. And they rented out an office in the corner where they was, a producer was producing the In-Betweeners from there. And it was my personality. I was a shy kid. But being in film, I don't know what it was. Just growing up, like, I don't know what it was, but I'd sort of found a confidence in myself. And so if I saw someone with something that I wanted, I would go and ask, and, you know, always politely, but I went in and said, can I work on In-Betweeners? Can I help? And my wife was an extra in one of the episodes. I was a floor runner. My brother was a floor runner and ended up being an extra in it as well. It was sort of, I was just having such a good time. Like, it was easy to go and offer to be an unpaid floor runner on something like that because I wanted to. And I turned it into like a family affair.
That's brilliant. So what was the, you know, you clearly working in live action, having an absolute blast, you know, got most of your family involved, which is always good. Saves on travel costs to and from location. So what made the change from live action to VFX? Was it something planned or another one of those opportunities that came along and you thought, why not?
There'll be a running theme to this a little bit, Julian, like love again. But it's I'd been at DNA for like a year and a half, 2 years at that point, and there was only 6 or 7 of us of that company. There was sort of like senior producers and finance, and sort of like post-production, and then like me, the PA/script reader. There was no promotion path. At the time, I was sat next to Alex Garland, who had not yet made his directorial debut and was writing Dredd next to me. Looking back, I was very lucky to have that be my sort of like grounding in the industry. I always say that sort of like I learned straight away that script is such an important part of the industry to get the story right early, to develop and work on the script early. So I knew that at some point I had to leave DNA Films, but I was enjoying it too much. I'm an Arsenal fan, and they had a number of Arsenal tickets, and there was one match where me, Andrew McDonald and Mark Strong went to watch the Arsenal, and I was kind of sat there thinking like, you know, I could do this job forever. This is the best job. And Andrew McDonald one day sat me down and was sort of like, Ryan, you've been here a year and a half. Like, you've outgrown us. You need to, if I don't move you on, you're going to stay here forever. And I didn't want to hear that from him. I wanted to stay there forever, but he was a good man. He lined up 3 jobs for me. He lined up, third AD on Dredd, and I'd been on Dredd from script, and we hired a storyboard artist a comic artist called Jock, who worked for 2000 AD. So we turned the script into a comic, and then we went and we were shooting Dredd at the time, and I love Dredd. And to see it go from script through to shoot, I wanted to follow it through to final delivery. So to go and be a third AD, it was shooting in South Africa. To go and be a third AD in South Africa, I would have just missed my wife. I was sort of like young and in love still. So I didn't want to do that one. He said I could go and be a production accountant on the show. And I'm so very glad I said no to that.
Even though it would involve spreadsheets.
It would have involved a lot of spreadsheets. But I chose VFX because their office was across the road, and I could continue to sort of, live the existence I was living a little bit. And they had Excel sheets there as well, which was cool. And it allowed me the opportunity to see Dredd through to final delivery by following the film into VFX.
And that was the changeover. That was the sort of, I suppose, the start of your VFX and animation career.
Yeah, I was a little fortunate, I must say, because I entered that VFX facility with the ability to, you know, when Andrew and Alon and Alex Garland were turning up to do a VFX review, they were my mates from when I used to work with them. So sort of like the clients would turn up and I'd make sure I sort of got a chance to say hi, and they knew me and my life at that point. So I got good access to Dredd very early on. But yeah, that was the first film I saw from script to screen, and it would be a while until I saw that happen again. And it served as a good reminder to know just how long a film takes to make, how many thousands of people work on it, and sort of like how few of them actually get credited. And it gave a really good sort of like overview of the industry from an early start.
Cool. And you've sort of fairly neatly segued back and forth between animation and VFX. How would you define the difference between the two? And do you think you need to take a different approach to each, or is there a lot of overlap?
I think there's a huge amount of overlap. It's sort of like different but the same in so many different ways. I'd been at Prime Focus, we delivered Dread, and then I'd gone on to do, I was working my way up the VFX vendor ladder. And my wife was at Absolute Radio, sort of at the other end of Soho, and we was both working incredible hours. And then we got married and realised that we hadn't really seen each other for years because we'd just both been working such long hours. So we went traveling, and when we went to Australia for a while, and when we came back, I said that I wanted to do something that wasn't visual effects. And my two options were, to me, I thought that my two options were either games or animation, because I could see the skills that could be transferred. An animation offer sort of came in before I got back to the UK. I landed in the UK on like a Wednesday. I went to the interview on a Thursday. They asked me to start on a Friday, but I needed to get a house or somewhere to live. So I had to ask them if I could have a weekend before I started, but I was straight into animation. And there is a lot of like crossover, ShotGrid and Excel, Nuke and Maya, and like the same tools. In certain departments, the same people bounce backwards and forwards. I find that the very biggest difference, I think, is the speed of decision making between the two. I think in animation, a project, you don't have to make instant decisions. You can delay a decision. You can work something out. You can take multiple passes at something. In live action, once a camera's rolling, you need to get it in camera. And if an actor decides to walk through a different door than you planned for, then you have to react to it. And it kind of, once something's in camera, it's there. So I find that different speed of decision making is the biggest. When I was on the hybrid movies, Tom and Jerry and Coyote vs. Acme, there was a lot of sort of like managing that, an animation team, a story team wants to work things out. They want to plan things. A live action team wants to see what happens on the day, sort of like how the lights cast shadows and how that's going to affect composition. So it's, and I think with that different speed of decision making, also live action's a bigger industry than animation. Animation is a smaller industry in that regard. And I think it leads to different environments, and I much prefer the animation environment. I would say it leads to a different expectation on sort of creative input. I think in live action, you're either on the production side of things or the creative side of things, whereas in animation, that can be blurred a lot more. And I think it is because you can suggest something in animation, and we can look at that further down the line, and we could try it and dismiss it. In live action, the director is trying to do so many things all at once that you can't even really speak to them on the day of shoot. And by the time the shoot has come and gone, you're committed to what's in camera. So there's a different environment between the two.
And do you think, maybe from what you've been saying, that animation is possibly in more of a creative environment than live action?
Yeah, I would say so. I think just because projects run for longer, relationships have more time to grow, and with that growth, trust can be brought in. Like I say, my strength is budgets and numbers and schedules. But we all have a creative in us. To say that someone isn't creative is kind of a mad thing. We all tell our own stories in some shape or form. There's a difference between that and directing kind of an incredible animated movie, of course, but we all have ideas. We all know what we enjoy and don't enjoy when we watch something on screen, what makes us laugh as individuals, what makes our kids laugh, etc. I would say that animation is just, the environment encourages that sort of shared creativity a lot more.
Yeah, interesting.
This podcast is made possible thanks to the support of the awesome Libery Consulting. Libery offers specially tailored industry-related training courses. Check them out at liberyconsulting.com. That's LIBERI consulting.com. You can also find links to their fantastic courses on the Festivus website.
You've mentioned a few times as we've been chatting that sort of as you've progressed through your career, you've sort of been in the right place at the right time and had the courage to go for an opportunity. And sometimes people have a mentor or a professional friend, and you mentioned the people on Dread and used to go to Arsenal with them and stuff like that. Have there been people in your life that you've been able to talk things through with, if a job's been offered or a position's been offered or you've been up against something, someone that you've been able to chat to and say, look, I'm stuck or I don't know what to do? Because you mentioned trust an awful lot. Someone that you've trusted as much as that to be able to give you guidance and advice?
Yeah, 100%. I've been very fortunate on that front. Like, don't get me wrong, I've worked with people that I won't rush to work with again. All of us have those experiences. My brother was in VFX for a very long time as well, and he sort of like did the Star Wars and Guardians and Avengers kind of route. I really early tried to make sure I was in environments that I was enjoying a lot more. And I think some of the smaller projects, some of the teams away from some of those bigger spends, you can be in an environment where you're growing and learning and sort of still getting your film education, still progressing, but away from some of those individuals that can make it hard on a day to day. But so I've always tried to put myself near good people. And I would say there's two main kind of role models I've had. One was Chris Defaria, who was a very difficult individual to work for because he had very high expectations, and you absolutely had to live up to them. And you never went into his office with a problem. You went into his office with two solutions and allowed him to sort of pick. And he made me operate at my highest level. But alongside that, certainly to me, he was such a human being. Sort of like there was a very difficult moment on Tom and Jerry where I had a bunch of stuff going on in my personal life, and that man was under incredible pressure. But he was sort of like, he stopped and he was sort of like, let's go and talk it out a little bit. And he was an absolute human to me in that moment. It was what I needed. And the more I got to know him, the more I sort of saw this mindset that I'd never really been exposed to before. I don't know if it's an American mindset. I don't know what it is in particular, but I think before Chris, I always assumed that I'd do really well in a coordinator role, and then I would step up to a production manager role. And if I did that for long enough, I would step up into like a producer role, all vendor side. I didn't really have an ambition, as it were. And Chris really sort of like said to me, where do you want to go like in your career? And, it's all very achievable. You just have to go for it and be smart. I would take job offers to him, and he was my boss at the time. And I wasn't trying to do a brinksmanship thing. He would just talk them through with me. And he always gave good advice. When the Amazon exec role was sort of like coming along, I didn't want to do that job. I was enjoying working for Chris on Coyote versus Acme. It was an amazing job. But being the good mentor that he was, and friend, I would say as well, he said, you've got to go work for Amazon MGM and see how a streamer sort of produces movies. I didn't understand how a studio worked. So he was such a good mentor in that regard that he kind of put me in somewhere I didn't really want to be, and I wanted to keep working for him, but without that step, I'm not here now. So I'm very grateful to him. And I've got to say, Martin Hobbs is someone I worked with 3 times now, and I hope I get to do it a 4th time. He was a different kind of mentor. He just sort of, he let me grow. He let me make my own mistakes in a safe environment. He was someone that I could always go to and ask for advice. And if I made a mistake, there was no slap on the wrist. There was just sort of like, here's how you do it next time kind of thing. Every time I've worked for Martin, I have stepped up in my career because he's given me that space, as it were. I'm very fortunate on that front.
Giving you space to grow, and that as you making mistakes. I mean, people say you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. I think that's absolutely true. And you just mentioned Amazon, which was the job that you had prior to the one that you've just started, which was it a new role specifically created by Warner Brothers?
The current role that
Yeah,
I'm
your
doing.
new role now, yeah.
Yeah, so this is production executive for WBPA, and I'm on week 3 at this point in time. So
How's it going?
I'm loving it. I must say, it's been great. It's what WBPA are doing are working very closely with a number of UK partners, and they are LA based. I'm one of one in the UK, so I'm boots on the ground for them a little bit. I have relationships with a lot of the partners they've already set up. So it's just sort of they've got a lot of interest in the UK, so it's making sure that I can sort of facilitate that. I'm on time zones. It just makes sense. And when I was on Tom and Jerry and Coyote vs. Acme, I worked very closely with Chris Leahy, who was my exec at the time. And we just developed a lot of trust between one another. And so when I left Warner's being production side to go to Amazon studio side, we both stayed in touch. And when I think once they realized they was working out what role they needed in the UK, where it would be. And once they'd worked that out, it made sense. I wanted to go to work for them. They wanted me to return to them. My time away from animation I feel very fortunate. I'm in a position in my career where I can pick the jobs that excite me a little bit. The job needs to be there and I need to win it for sure. But I'm in a position where I can go for the things that I want to do. And I've learned that I love animation. And so sort of like when Chris Leahy and Warner's with their excellent sort of like slate of IP and knowing some of the people there, when they came along, it was a no-brainer, really.
And are you allowed to talk about any of the IP that you're working on, or is it all hush-hush?
Currently, the public knowledge is that we have Cat in the Hat that's a long way down the line and is looking fun. That's an IP that my nan and granddad used to read it to me when I was a kid, and we used to race to see who could read the Dr. Seuss the quickest. So sort of like Cat in the Hat. Cat in the Hat is like a special one for me. My little girl loves the Illumination did the Grinch, and she loved that. So I'm very excited to work on a project that she can watch and sort of enjoy. We're working with Locksmith. We've got Bad Fairies that is underway at this point in time, and it's Bill Damashki is pushing us in a really good direction. It's sort of like there are some exciting projects coming along. The slate, which I can't go into too much detail on, has like all the IPs that I love on it. So there's some really cool projects coming through that I would love to be a part of bringing to the big screen.
Sounds like a job made in heaven for you, really.
I'm enjoying it. And there's like Excel galore as well. So like,
we'll have to meet up again and exchange spreadsheets. We'll look forward to that.
I do like a good formula. I will take one.
Now, with your new job, and Warner's obviously looking very clearly at the UK as a destination for animation production, do you see more animation features coming to the UK? And if so, what do you think is so attractive, in the US? Sorry, what is so attractive about the UK for the US?
100%. I mean, I don't think my job exists if that direction of travel isn't already underway. I think the tax incentives are hard to look past a little bit. I think some great work has been done there by individuals to get us into a place where financially we are very attractive. When you do sit in the studio role and sort of entire shows can become single line items, the ability to have a financial edge on another area is always very helpful. But I think also we have a lot. We have the language, we have the talent, we have. I always think of the UK as being the sort of like the global center for VFX. I think we have the right people here to grow animation, but we have. Animation is part of this nation's history as well, with sort of like Aardman and stuff like that. So I think there's a real, that experience has been here for a very long time, and we are an easy place for LA to look to when placing animation and wanting to work with individuals.
Well, that's great news, and long may it continue. I think you've been involved in animation production, and you said delivering stuff on time, on budget, and keeping everything under control. Do you see animation production changing with the advent of AI? I mean, and do you think it can be properly harnessed to streamline the production process? And if so, what do you think animators and people in other production roles need to do to ensure they're part of the change? Because let's face it, AI ain't going away. So what can people do to sort of, to harness its powers and keep up with its development?
Yeah, like AI is, if not already, going to change the world. And we've all seen Terminator, right? So we all have like this sort of like not inane, that's not fair at all. We all have this sort of like fear of what AI could bring forward. There are elements of it that obviously we're all very excited for. And I've just left Amazon, a tech firm that is very open about how they want to use AI where they can really. I think AI will change animation. The fear is that it replaces sort of like the low level roles and starts blocking entry level positions. I think I entered the industry through, being able to do the inane kind of Excel tasks that my production managers and producers didn't want to do. And by doing that, by copying that data around and building things, I was learning things. I think we all, when we think of AI, we think of Gen AI from an artist perspective. I think it affects production staff as well. Sort of like if you have all these really clever AI tools that mean you don't need to bring junior coordinators and PAs on board, you can't expect someone to just enter the industry as a production manager. There has to be a pathway for them to sort of learn the environment as well as sort of like the tasks that are required. But obviously from the Gen AI, from the artist side of things what I think is that there needs to be a real responsibility taken by individuals that are in a position to do so. So tax incentives, if there isn't already, I'm sure there will be wording in sort of like how that money needs to be brought around. Sort of like you can't tax incentives that just allow a company to deliver something with full AI wouldn't help our industry in this country. And individuals at the top of vendors, on show side, on studios, just need to make sure they're being responsible with what tools they are developing with AI and making sure that it's encouraging artists to focus on the creative and supplementing their tasks as opposed to replacing them. I think the big fear with AI is that it replaces individuals, and that means that the global skill set of our industry will start to decline as more and more sort of things are taken away from the human, and that will end badly for an entire industry. And also, kind of, AI doesn't pay income tax, so it's important to make sure that we're not sort of doing something that affects society on an even grander scale than our little film and TV industry, as it were. So I think what people can do is they can learn how to utilize it. There's sort of like the prompt guide that you can pick up that sort of, we all learned how to use Google effectively back in the day with like highlighting certain words. There is a world where you learn how to prompt sort of efficiently, and I really try and shy away from using AI as much as I can. It is sort of like that fear of Terminator. So I kind of avoid it entirely, but I will have to learn and use it to keep up. It's just making sure I use it in a responsible way to make sure it's only, and all of us have to do it to make sure that we never replace someone's role with it.
It's interesting because you throughout our discussion, you talked about trust, you've talked about relationships within production, and that's how you make things happen. And I think what you're now talking about with sort of personal responsibility within studios and within organizations, about how you, because long term, you're right. I mean, if all these, number one, if the access into the industry gets taken away because there aren't the junior roles and there isn't the training that is going to allow people to sort of jump up to another level, it could be quite a serious problem. And what you mentioned about the tax incentives as well is quite close to my heart, because I do an awful lot of that with Film London. So I'm going to be talking to people about that. But it's not going away, and it's it's going to be very, very interesting, I think, over the next 2 or 3 years as to, how it streamlines things without damaging the creative development of people, the production development of the industry. Because you're right, in 4 or 5 years, we could have quite a big hole in our sector.
Yeah, it's for the vendors that want to survive, the studios that want to survive, they will have to make sure that they're not just using AI for short-term solutions, to cut costs and get a competitive edge over their competitors, because that is a very short-term solution. But I think it's tax incentives are a high level way of managing things like that, and then there will be sort of like different levels that different individuals can manage. But it's kind of up to all of us, and the artist at the desk that feels they don't have a voice should just use their own voice and make sure that everyone's talking about it as much as possible, really.
Just so as we're coming to the end of our chat, looking back at your professional life to date, what do you think the best bit of either creative or business advice you were ever given was?
Two bits, really. The first one was Christofaria, again, was just to be ambitious. I spent the first 10 years of my career really sort of like just trying to climb a ladder, not really knowing where it would take me, enjoying my career, but the mindset of if I do well in a role, I could get a promotion or a pay rise or a better role might come along. It wasn't until Chris kind of sort of had that conversation with me where I was sort of like, actually, where do I want to end up? How does this career path work for me? I wish I'd had a little bit more ambition earlier in my career, and I think maybe I'd have. Who knows? I'm in a good position at this stage. So I'm not complaining about anything, but I spent a long time thinking that my lot in life was to work my way up the VFX vendor sort of ladder, as it were. And it wasn't until I realized that there was more out there for me than that I've kind of really gone for it. So I would suggest to people to be brave, to be ambitious. This is an industry that rewards that. And if you aim higher, it's only yourself really that will block that through not sort of like going for things, not opening doors, not asking people for stuff. And the other thing that I've kind of picked up as I've gone away, and it's become a bit of a sort of like a mindset for me, is just to try and enjoy work as much as possible. And that is through having healthy working relationships with your colleagues, being honest, being sort of acting in a way that you'd want everyone else to behave around yourself. That way you're in an environment, people will want you to succeed. People will want to work with you, that you can be reliable. I've worked with 1 or 2 people that had people in their sights and it didn't do anyone any good. I think just trying to be honest and reliable is a really good way to sort of, people need that. People need reliability. A producer needs a team of people that are going to deliver on all roles. So being reliable is a really good skill set to have. And like I say, being ambitious, try and go as far as you can in this industry.
No, good advice. And well, I mean, based on that, would you encourage someone to enter the industry right now?
Yeah, 100%, man. I'll go back to that original question, like a bit about sort of like people like me, where do we go in? And I'm aware I'm saying that as like a white male as well, which means that sort of like I probably have more doors open to me than lots of other parts of society. But like I wouldn't say to a young person, no, your lot in life is to go and be a tradesman. It's sort of like, it's such an amazing industry filled with amazing people. And I was speaking to Christofaria about AI, and he was talking to me about sort of like when film used to be film and then digital came along, and this huge kind of like technical shift in the industry. So the industry is not going anywhere because of AI. It's, I would fully encourage people to get into an industry where you can tell stories and have such a positive impact on people's lives.
That's a fantastic endorsement. And my last question, do you still yearn to swim with sharks, or has that gone away now?
I've swum with a couple of sharks in this industry, I think. I'd rather sort of I'd rather swim with sharks in a nice gilded cage that I can do for half an hour and then get out. Animation seems to be a much cushier environment than the shark infested waters, as it were.
Ryan, I can't thank you enough for finding the time to chat today. I know how crazy busy you are. You're 3 weeks into a new job. I wish you well, mate. It's been fantastic. Thanks so much.
No worries. Thanks, Julie. It's been a pleasure.
Oh man, these podcasts are just getting better and better. I wish I'd had someone like Ryan giving me advice throughout my career. Very inspiring indeed. A huge thanks to Ryan for his time. And remember, subscribe, like and comment, because I have a fragile ego, okay? Until next time, and in the words of shark enthusiast Ryan Delaney, be ambitious. See you soon. And the show wouldn't happen at all without the wonderful work of Janet Belmforth at Lebery Consulting for her incredible organisational skills, to Julian Scott at Film London for his charm, wit and talent as our host. Find out more about Film London at filmlondon.org.uk. And the edit skills of Odelia Sickinger, who is also an awesome kids development and production executive. Find her on LinkedIn. Thank you all, and see you in the funny pages.